Too much and never enough. Welcome to my channel. My name is Samuel and I want to make self-growth normal. If you want to make self-growth normal, because I don't want to do it alone, then make sure to smash that like button. Written by clinical psychologist Mary Trump, niece of the POTUS. When I first looked at this, I was like, what? Who could have such specific information on our president? I was curious too, like, is this a biography? Before the straight up review, by the way, I have a little bit to say about how I view the success and failure of our president that pertains to what I learned from this book. So if you're watching this right now and you're like,
Sam, you suck green eggs, shut up and get to the point.
There is a part around my breast area right now that says what part of the video to skip to. If you are reviewing this book, I think that it's important to the viewers, probably, what your views on the president might be. So as far as mine, I used to make music, and I said once in a lyric that the imperfections of Trump ain't the same as Obama, Clinton, or that of Bush, and everyone is different, but if you're looking at the bad, ain't that what you're gonna get instead of the good? My point is that no matter who the president is, I personally like to see both sides of that coin. So I'm less surprised no matter what happens, good or bad. Does that make sense? You can hate Hitler, but he was a phenomenal public speaker. Also, if anything good or bad happens, more importantly, to 6 million people, and it was directly your idea, there is something that you can learn from it. You and anyone else. I'm Jewish, by the way. I was raised Reform. I went to summer camp for years. So please do not get any strange ideas when I compliment Hitler. But it is possible to learn from people somehow despite their misdeeds and flaws. Would you agree? If not, just bear with me for one more second before I get right to the review of this book, because like I said, both sides of the coin. The more I learn about the history of America, the more polarized I find myself by it. Because it was started by people who had this incredible idea of, guys, let's be free. Let's be a free nation. But let's also captivate others while we do it. Like, I'm inspired by courage, but I'm disgusted by like the ownership of humans on the part of other humans. Clearly, it's a very surface level of things, but I'm also saying it because there's gotta be some value that not enough of us are looking for in the happenings of our country right now that everyone can learn from for both selfish and selfless purposes. And that is why I'm bothering with this book. I saw it on Audible's bestseller list and I was like, if it's important to other people, it's important to me. So let's talk about this book. Is it good? That's a good question, right? Is it offensive or defensive toward Trump? Or both? I mean, it was written by his niece, man. There's gotta be some compassion for what happened in his earlier years. In the words of it, Too Much and Never Enough is about the story of the Trump family. And it is astounding because no member of the family other than Mary Trump is willing to tell it. Out of family loyalty, I guess. By the way, I try not to get too specific with like different occurrences from this book in the video because personally, I like the taste of spoiled milk a lot more than I will ever like spoilers in my book reviews. I'll say it flat out. The first and last chapter and the epilogue are that's the most Trump bashing you're gonna hear in this book. Which, by the way, isn't even that bad. Like, if you're watching this review, chances are you have probably seen so much worse. In the end, Mary felt that if she spoke publicly about her uncle, she was worried she might be, painted as this disgruntled, disinherited niece, looking to cash in or settle some sort of a score. But the way she paints his personality, it almost sounds like a lot of his successes, it was just a result of his charisma. People just kept giving him chances because of his personality. Despite what, declaring bankruptcy 5 different times? In my late childhood, I had great and horrific experiences with American mental health treatment, so to hear about symptoms of disorders that she thinks he might have, it gave me this ugly taste in my mouth. But maybe that's just me. Maybe I'm crazy. Maybe I need to start seeing 2 psychiatrists. What's very interesting about this book, strikingly so, is that people will talk and talk and talk about the president, but what do they know about the story of where he's coming from? And if it's not that much at all, would they bother listening to that story? You don't get political views of his. You don't get those out of thin air, do you? But there were some questions I still had though, why? Why on earth would Fred Trump have children? I'm not saying that in some sort of way that's oh, I hate Trump so much, I wish his dad never had. No, I'm serious. I mean this from a concern, I'm very concerned. What is the practical use in having children if you are going to treat them like that? I mean, he raised them in an environment where low self-esteem was absolutely 100%. If I could imitate Trump, this would be the perfect part of the video to do it. Absolutely 100% guaranteed. There was no reward and 100% punishment. Donald seemed to be the only child who turned out like his dad, but it's kind of like he's like this like mutation of him. I don't know how to explain it. Like in some ways, like Fred sounds so much worse. All of his kids kind of ended up with daddy issues in a sense, especially Freddy. But Donald was the one who really learns to hide it, like at all costs. He still does. In case I forgot to mention, if you get this book and you check out the first chapter and you're like, this book sucks, the whole thing sucks, I checked out the first chapter, the entire thing sucks, like, you gotta hear out the rest, like please. I think the author actually did like the Trump bashing in the beginning and the end. I think she did that on purpose, to state where she's coming from and her intentions. If she didn't tell you how she felt about her uncle at some point or points in the book, most of the book is just objective enough, it's not too objective. But if she didn't state her feelings at some point or points, a lot of people who check it out, I'm willing to bet, would probably think she's trying to defend him, given the twisted, grotesque nature of the truth behind the family that's never had the chance to be told to the public like this one. And for the most part in between, she knows how to state things in a way that just, it doesn't sound like,
oh, he just BS'd his way to success, like.
As far as Freddy's attempts to escape the financial clutches of Trump management while the company took storm, I admire it. Like, he really tried. I remember Donald kind of talking about like what happens to Freddy in the end is at some point in like Art of the Deal, which by the way was ghostwritten, if I recall correctly, almost by the author of this book. It's almost as if Fred Trump's children were like gnarled into this multi-decade long game. It might last forever, who knows? Thus with seemingly no option to quit. And the only one who even remotely stood a chance was Donald. But like, if that's the case, like Donald won, he won so much that like, if there's one game that he ever won in his entire life, it would probably be that. I have this role model, right? His name's Grant Cardone. He's known for his book, The 10X Rule, about like everything you want in your life, just multiplying it by 10. He owns, or did own before the shutdown, like an almost, $2 billion real estate portfolio. He comes from sales. He owns multiple companies. He runs what's called the 10X Growth Conference every year, which is like, people have called it the Super Bowl of entrepreneurs. A lot of people don't know he's really into like Scientology, and a lot of people really hate Scientology. He's caused controversy in ways that have drawn him a decent amount of Trump comparisons over the years. After checking out this book, I can say that like, if you know where both of them come from, you can tell Grant's intentions are of an astonishingly different, like, what is in my eye? An astonishingly different energy level. They come from a very separate place. I know it probably sounds like I'm just talking about Trump in this review and how the author like treated the story of his whole family, but I did find his story the most interesting. His and probably Fred's. Something else that impresses me in books, something probably more than anything else, I couldn't find this in another review, is the concision. Most books, like if you told me about this book, I would expect it to be 20 hours long, the audiobook. The audiobook was 7 hours long. For a 7-hour long audiobook, you simply could not expect this many details to be so neatly packed in without it coming off as like too dense in the slightest. And it reads like, probably because it reads like it was written by someone who is like unmistakably captivated by the background of her whole family. Regardless of how she feels like it's like treating the world over the years. I had no idea our multi-billionaire president was in such an astounding amount of debt. And if I did, I imagine I couldn't easily find elsewhere how it happens. There's a book I reviewed last year called The Charisma Myth by Olivia Fox-Cabane about how charisma can actually be taught. And there are occasional warning signs in it regarding the use of charisma for negative and, for lack of better verbiage, toxic pursuits. Trump's background with self-promotion, I think is like a quintessential, like, modern example of the exploitation of charisma for personal gain. It's almost like his ego is his most expensive asset. But I think Mary Trump did a really good job. I think she was on her best behavior here. Given the fact that she's family, like, it's as if she has every reason to keep things objective. Something I'm also curious about is what kind of effect this book will have on the way people view him after they check it out. I'm also curious about whether I'm the only person who checked this book out and still has questions about things like this. Although very, very different from the ones I had before checking it out. I found myself constantly thinking about how this was written in the circumstances in which it was published, or given the circumstances. Part of me was also wondering, why now? Like, why is it being published now? Why not 4 years ago? Did she want to see how things went? I mean, that would make sense, but what if he gets elected again? Why not wait another 4 years? Like, I don't know how long it took her to write this. She mentioned COVID once in the beginning of the book and like multiple times toward the end. This one part stood out. The book has these moments, but overall they are a lot less common than I thought they probably would have been. Mary Ann and Elizabeth were the only siblings other than my father to work outside the family business. Still, they acted as if they had earned every penny of my grandfather's wealth, and that money was so tied up in their sense of self-worth that letting it go was not an option. It's stuff like this that people say in negative reviews.
Classic narrative fallacy here. She's just using her name, or she's just using negativity for money. Like,
I imagine it's probably because we have occasional remarks like this one scattered across too much and never enough. The most emotional parts of this book, bottom line, were the beginning, the first chapter, and the end, the last chapter and the epilogue. But the last chapter, a civil servant in public housing, that chapter is like, it's fire. Like, it's not even like if there's a bad type of fire, maybe it's kind of also that, if that even makes sense. But like, as a result, I think it's very compelling. There is a very unique perspective in this chapter. And again, the epilogue, the 10th circle. But dude, there are clinical psychologists and there are Trump family members. But how many people in the world are both? The reason Trump is where he is now, I'd argue, given what I learned from Too Much and Never Enough, and this is another reason I love books of this nature. Individually speaking, like, the reason is that he speaks with a presumably unmatched degree of confidence, and he moves with an irreplaceable degree of persistence. And I have never ever heard anyone disagree with that, no matter how they felt about him. I think it's important to see what you can get out of books, and what of that you can give to others. If you're thinking of checking this book out, like, this is your money you're spending, don't you deserve to look for the most value you can get out of what you put that money into? For me, what I just said before that's the value that I get in a book like this. I hope I don't sound like I'm taking it one side or the other. I just want to talk about the entirety of it, right? Because I think that is like where you can find more than the whole. And I hope that this review so far has helped you to either do the same or see the power and the freedom and the love and the peace in doing the same. But that's just the summary. Next, we're gonna do quotes, standout quotes from the book, who I recommend this book to, and what books to maybe check out next. He once told me that his doctor said, if you have another drink, it will kill you. For Donald, too much of a good thing was a better thing. Everyone in my family experienced a strange combination of privilege and neglect. You know what your father was worth when he died? A whole lot of nothing. If your only currency is money, that's the only lens through which you determine worth. The role that fear played in his childhood and the role it plays now can't be overstated, and the fact that fear continues to be an overriding emotion to him speaks to the hell that must have existed in that house 6 decades ago. Direction 1. Without question, I recommend this book to anyone who strongly supports or opposes the performance of our president. And the personality, not just the performance, but also the personality of our president. I think a lot of people who love him don't know what's wrong with him, primarily because no one's perfect. And I think a lot of people who hate him don't know why he is the way that he is, as much as maybe they'd like to. Direction 2. If you like this book, admittedly, I wouldn't say I'm as well versed in topics like this. One, as I'd like to be. I mean, to be fair, like, I think this book is like a closest thing we'll probably see to a unicorn for a while regarding anything predominantly about the Trump family. I guess Art of the Deal? I feel a little different about that one though. I feel like if I checked that one out, it would hit kind of differently. After checking this one out, I liked Becoming by Michelle Obama. I found it like pleasant how like surprisingly non-political that book was. Too Much and Never Enough by Mary Trump. There's a link in the description if you guys want to check it out and read the reviews. That and all the other books that I mentioned in this video if you want to check those out too. If there are any other books that you guys want me to check out and review, please let me know in the comments below. Also, let me know if you checked out this book and you liked it. But hey, make sure to smash that like button, subscribe if you haven't already, because I don't get why people watch this far into my videos and they don't subscribe. But if you have subscribed and you want to turn it up just a notch and turn on that notification bell to get a notification every time I drop a new video, that would mean the world to me. Thank you guys so much for watching. I really appreciate it. You can find me everywhere, and I will see you then.